Where do you think Kilkenny are at coming into this game? Now, I just want to list out the players who have done the scoring for them so far this year. Billy Drennan, he scored 152, 112 of that from play. Mossy Keown scored 110, all from play. Owen Cody scored 2-5 from play and 2 frees. John Donnelly 10, Paddy Deegan 6, Billy Ryan 6. I mean, obviously Adrian Mullen and TJ Reid haven't been there, but without them, and we're going to assume that those two guys aren't going to play this weekend, like, do they have the firepower from what you're seeing?
Not sure if they have the firepower this weekend, to be honest with you. And I remember thinking back to the Cork Kilkenny game this time last year. Wasn't that seen as a big statement win by Cork, I should say, down at the park? Yeah, and I think Kilkenny had. Did TJ play? TJ mightn't have played that evening, but I think they had pretty much full strength outside of that, and it was a rip-roaring game. I can remember well on the Saturday evening. So it's yeah, I'm not sure what to make of Kilkenny so far. It's hard enough to get a read on, and they would have had to play a style maybe that's unfamiliar to them and unsuitable to them against Waterford last weekend. I'd expect it to be not necessarily straight up, but it would be a good bit more straight up than it was last Sunday. And I think from a Cork point of view, and John kind of mentioned it there, you kind of have a fair idea of the physicality that Kilkenny are going to throw at you. And I suppose that's the question that's been thrown at Cork the last couple of years, and whether the forwards work hard enough. And I think John kind of said it there. They're definitely, I remember just seeing in the Limerick game in the second half when Hoggy made a 100-yard dash just to cover off a run, just to tag, would say, a runner. They need that. We know that they can all score and put up huge tallies. It's that kind of robustness. Are they going to front up with and get big tackles in and turn around the defender? Do you know what I mean? Rather than maybe a lad walking through. And they're going to get a fair bit of physicality at the weekend, and we'll hopefully learn a bit more about them. I'd probably be expecting Cork to win, realistically, just based on.
You who questions Cork at every turn, you think they're going to man up at Nowlan Park of all places?
Yeah, no, I think they'll get a result. Yeah, I think they'll get a result. They've been a good bit more consistent than Kilkenny throughout the league, I'd say. Now Kilkenny have been a lot better since the Tipperary game, but it's mad when John went through some of the names there that we haven't really seen. Darragh Fitzgibbon, Tim O'Mahony, Mark Coleman, Alan Connolly. A lot of there's 4 basically nearly guaranteed starters. So how kind of Pat Ryan reintegrates those guys back in when they're fit is going to be interesting as well, and see whether some of those lads potentially get game time this weekend will be kind of fascinating too. And I think that's why they need to get to a league final potentially too, to get a 20 minutes into a guy who's going to feature at some stage in Munster.
Yeah, just a reminder, we're brought to you by ourstore.ie. Also on OurGame.ie, we have an article here with the top goal scoring teams in Division 1 so far. So I think it's interesting here that Kilkenny have scored just 4 goals in their 5 games so far. Contrast that to Cork, who have 12. Most conceded, both Cork and Kilkenny have just 4 conceded each. Then I just always find it interesting, just the scoring differential. Kilkenny are plus 26, Cork are plus 14. And that's Cork with 5 wins out of 5. So it's not like they're absolutely destroying teams either. They're getting wins. They're obviously picking up confidence on the route. But like against Limerick, they won by a point, 217-22. Against Galway, really high scoring, 424-322. Against Westmeath, and they changed the team around, 221-21. Had a turnaround victory against Wexford, which was similar to the Limerick one, and they're getting used to winning from behind, which is really positive, 214-18, and then drew 218 apiece the last time out against Clare. So yeah, they're unbeaten. Sorry, they didn't win 5 from 5. They're unbeaten.
I prefer to see Cork winning tight games, just on the score difference, rather than blowing teams away, if you get me, because I think they're more character building wins, and generally over the past few years they haven't been winning tight games. So I think that's nearly more of a positive than winning by 7 or 8.
Let's finish off talking about the game this weekend between Kilkenny and Cork. Like, Kilkenny's form, in some respects, it's been decent, and eking out a win at home against Waterford the last day was impressive because they weren't fully flowing throughout the game. But before that, poor against Tipperary. Obviously, they made a bit of a burst in the second half, but 12 points down at half time, not ideal. Weaker side of the draw and all that. Do we have a clue where Kilkenny are at this year?
Not really. Not really. I was going to ask who's going to be centre back, but I assume Richie Reid is going to be centre back. I think the 2 wing back slots will be new players. In Blanchfield, from what I've seen of him, and even the last day was good. And you know what, he's he's not taking on shots anymore as well, which I've noticed. Which is maybe come summertime he will, when you can open up your shoulders a bit more with maybe a drier ball. But he's generally trying to feed the full forward line. I think that's one thing I have noticed with Derek Ling's Kilkenny, that maybe shooting from out the field has been maybe a bit less than, under the previous regime. They are really trying to pepper ball to the inside line and give favourable ball into the forwards. But I could pick most of the team, whereabouts they'll be playing. You couldn't really be sure. I'm not sure if Owen Murphy's going to be fit for the weekend as well. He wasn't listed in the squad last weekend after coming off injured against Dublin. Very much doubt we'll see TJ. What have we had? We had 2 squads. He's been in the last 2 squads. Richie Hogan we haven't seen him yet, which is kind of interesting in itself. But the fact that he's making the squads is very positive, because he hadn't made a league squad last year. So he could appear at the weekend as well.
I couldn't tell you where I think Cian Kenny is going to play this year. So
at the moment, Shane, I don't know if he'd be playing at all, to be honest.
You look at the recent times. Last year against Dublin, he played as named corner forward, but he was drifting out a little bit. We've seen him straight up play midfield in an All-Ireland final. More recently, we've seen him in the half-forward line before, and most recently we've seen him play wing-back and been taken off early, I think 2 games in a row. And I know there's some frustration in Kilkenny and locally around the village. What are you doing playing him wing-back? So, but you'd imagine that the idea is he's kind of like a deep-line playmaker. Now, I don't know how suited he is to man-marking as well as that.
Yeah, well, if he played centre-back for the village in a county final, I don't think it's that big of a departure to say that he would slot in wing back for Kilkenny. Whether it's his best position or not, I don't think it is.
Yeah, but surely he's a player they have to make sure that they find a role for him, because Kilkenny have lots of some super talented players like Adrian Mullen, obviously TJ Reid, there's Pádraig Walsh and so on and so forth. But there's a certain amount of players that they have that are workhorses, but they need to kind of mix and match it with a little bit of magic. He has a little bit of magic. I know too often he goes into contact, throws the arms up in the air looking for frees, but he does have a lot of talent.
Yeah, no, he's got plenty of talent, all right. I thought he'd filled out a bit as well, maybe compared to last year. And maybe, you don't want to pigeonhole a player, but he does look like a bit more of a top of the ground type player. So you imagine he'd excel a bit more come kind of May, June, if they're still in the equation at that stage. But yeah, you wouldn't be 100% sure where exact. Owen Cody would play somewhere in the forward line. You wouldn't be exactly sure where. You'd still be confident enough that TJ would probably be out number 11. Adrian Mullen would be drifting from the wing to midfield whenever he gets back. It's been a while now since he's played. He hasn't played since a challenge game between the All-Ireland Club semi-final and final. That's quite a while ago. We're on 2 months now at this stage, I'd say. So it was obviously quite a bad hamstring injury that he was carrying. It's funny, actually, he was that good for Ballyhale that he got nominated for Club Hurler of the Year, despite missing the club final, which is something else. And I'm just thinking about those club awards as well. I don't think it's ever happened before that someone's got a Hurler of the Year award, and there's a distinct possibility that they might never hurl at that level again. Do you know what I mean? With Joey Holden gone travelling or whatever. So if he doesn't play for Ballyhale again, he's going travelling for a couple of years. That's the way to finish out your club career.
So give me your prediction for Cork against Kilkenny. John Myler, or was it John Myler said that they would win there in Cork? Or sorry,
I could have said it as well. I think Cork will win.
Or maybe it was you that said it.
Just because I wouldn't be 100% sure with where Kilkenny are at the moment. And if you look at it, Cork have to be at the pitch very, very soon for Munster. Kilkenny don't really have to be. Cork wouldn't be reintroducing a player in the first round of Munster having not played at all. I don't think he'd be starting. Like Kilkenny probably will do with TJ, but they have that maybe luxury where they're gonna barring Galway, you'd fancy them potentially to beat the rest of the teams, even without maybe their main man. Just about do you know what I mean?
Hey, Wexford won in Nowlan Park last year after having, a disastrous end to the league.
Yeah, no,
but their full league has been fairly poor this year.
That's probably a bit different. They're kind of Kilkenny and Cork are in 2 different positions at the moment. I think the need is probably greater for Cork, and it would be a bit of a statement if they can go up to Kilkenny and win.
So let's talk about. I think that Kilkenny are going to win this game. Let's talk about the other semi-final, Limerick against Tipperary.
Go on, what's your basis for thinking Kilkenny are going to win?
Because I do think that Cork they're going to go there. They're going to look to, they're a bunch of cheetahs. and they're going to be dragged into a war, and I think they will struggle, and it'll be the same old way that they've lost to Kilkenny over the years. No, I know they beat them last year. Go on.
Cheetahs is an interesting way of describing them, because you're kind of describing them with, you know, a positive, but you're basically saying that the Cheetahs are going to go to Kilkenny and just get totally dogged out of it, essentially.
And a cheetah is a cat, and they're going to play the cats. So, yeah, I could have worked this a little bit better. But, like, cheetahs are obviously very fast. They're known for it now. They have a very on spring, a fair bit of toe.
Like a gazelle.
Yeah. So, I think Kilkenny will drag him into the war.
You just think it's going to be bang, 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 bang. There'll be a lot of collisions, and they maybe won't be able to express themselves as they normally would.
Well, like, I think, like, talent-wise, I think Cork have more talent than Kilkenny, especially if the two teams were both full strength. I would say that Cork have more talent. But time and time again over the years, they've ended up going into one of these big matches, and they've been dragged into the sort of game that they don't want to play. Like the All-Ireland final a couple of years ago, really different occasion to this. But they ended up getting dragged into a game where they were pumping long ball into Limerick numbers. And, you know, it was crazy. And I think that could end up happening this game as well. We'll see, will they get unnerved at Nowlan Park? To be fair, though, it's unfair to tarnish these players and Pat Ryan with that. But that would be my concern, that until we see it proven, you know, I'm going to say, okay, Kilkenny, I think they'll leak it out here.
You've almost taken my position, the Doubting Thomas position. I think their form is a bit steadier than Kilkenny in the league. I just think they'll just about get the job done. But
I still think Cork have the talent to win an All-Ireland. It's just I need to see a little bit more. You know, they keep failing this relatively the same sort of way. If they start doing things differently, like as they've done so far in the league, coming from behind, eking it out in low-scoring games against the likes of Wexford and so on, then I'll start to believe more. But it's just, I think this is exactly the sort of game that they tend to lose.
Okay, fair enough.
But maybe they'll prove us wrong here.
Hey, before